On this episode, as me and Neal Driscoll dive fin too deep, we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to cover. We got big updates on the Miami Dolphins head coaching search as new candidates have been added to the list. The Miami Dolphins completed their first in-person interview with a candidate today. Plus, Mike Tomlin has been fired. And there are reports out there that the Miami Dolphins could be the top landing spot for him, as well as reports that conflict that report. So we got a lot to talk about. Do me the favor, smash the like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. And as always, let's get into this.
You're listening to Fin Too Deep.
Tua back to throw. Blitz coming. They get to him. No, he takes off running. And he's in. Touchdown, Miami.
With the sixth pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Jalen Waddle.
Giving you unfiltered, informed, and controversial takes on the Miami Dolphins and the NFL Draft. Here's Reason and Neal.
What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we are back here for another one, fresh off his trip to the Bahamas. Apparently, everyone's going to watch this show and be like, yo, both of you guys go to the Bahamas way too much. Like, do you guys live there or whatever? Fresh off his trip. Well, actually, fresh off his trip to the did you get a cheesesteak while you're out in Philly? Fresh off his trip to Philly.
I did not, man. And another trip in next week on Wednesday, we head out for a long week over at Costa Rica as well. So it's been a little bit of travel.
Listen,
riding the coattails of my wife's success at work for hitting clubs. But
you should have told me you're going to Philly, because the place that I hear is Angelo's Pizza. Apparently, they got the best Philly in all of Philly. You know, not those those tourist traps.
You don't go to the tourist traps.
No.
The one that I like is in an old little neighbor in Philly. It's called Las Spadas, and I know there's like another Las Spadas like sandwich shop in Miami, but it's a different type of. It's an old little family-owned deli, man, and their cheesesteak was off the hook. But like my favorite sub is I'm a cold cut guy, man, and their cold cut was like unbelievable, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'll tell you though, man. I don't know how it is there. It's been a little cold here on the East Coast, man.
You know, I'm a big cheesesteak guy, but I've never been to Philadelphia for one yet. But listen, I'm a provolone guy, but I hear the way is the Cooper Sharp.
Yeah,
So,
I've only done like the cheese whiz, and I'm a provolone guy as well. So
yeah, I'm a provolone guy. So, but apparently Cooper Sharp, that's the way to go. All right, so let's talk about this, Neal. A lot has transpired since you and I
It's been quiet, right?
Yeah. Since you and I last convened up here, a lot has transpired. Mike McDaniel has been fired almost within 24 hours of Harbaugh to Miami rumors, Chad Alexander being made a late entry into the GM search. He ended up not getting the job. Jon-Eric Sullivan is now the GM. So give everyone your thoughts on the early stages of the head coaching search, Mike McDaniel's firing, and your thoughts on Jon-Eric Sullivan as the new GM.
Look, I think Mike McDaniel is a hell of a guy, and I think he's a bright offensive mind. And I think sometimes what happens is when you're really advanced at what you do, you skip a level. And Mike skipped a level where I think if he was an offensive coordinator for a year or two, he'd have been more prepared to be a head coach at this level. So I think Mike, look, he's got a lot of interest out there. He's going to get a prominent job. I would say Detroit offensive coordinator, Philly offensive coordinator.
I'd be all over that Detroit job, Neal. I ain't even gonna lie.
But I do think that he has a shot, specifically at the Cleveland. I've heard rumblings that if he was fired, that they would pursue him, and they're meeting with him. So I think Mike's going to get a pretty good job out of this. For me, I was ready for the change, so I totally support the move. But I'm not going to kick the guy out when he's out the door. I would say 2023 was one of the most fun seasons I've had as a Dolphins fan in a lot of years. That Ravens comeback game with Tyreek and Tua and Waddle was as epic as it gets here in Baltimore, where, at halftime I have 73 text messages from people like, the Dolphins suck. And I got to spend the whole night just sitting there responding to everyone, being like, up yours. You know what I mean? It was awesome. But I think the change was needed. And I truly believe that when Troy Aikman was going through the GM candidate list, that was probably one of the prominent questions. And, I think that they probably got a lot of feedback that came back that said, frankly, that change is needed to coach. So good luck to Mike. I mean, except when you play us, I always will root for a guy like Mike McDaniel. I just think it was change the Dolphins need. And obviously the news of the Harbaugh and the Tomlin and Kevin Stefanski and all these coaches that are available, it's the list that we talked about a few months ago about how lackluster it was. Well, it's probably as good as it's ever been if you could convince certain guys to coach your football team. So it's amazing how things change. And I just think it's unbelievable that we're sitting here and 9 NFL head coaching jobs are vacant at this time. I mean, you more than a quarter
And
of the
three
league are
of
looking
those
for head coach.
4 are in the AFC North.
Three in the
Three of
North,
those 9.
and if you
Yeah.
take the Ravens and Steelers out of it, you know, you have a lot of teams that are drafting really high in the draft, right? Like that's where it's like, it's very interesting. Like they're not great teams. And like for those that say the Dolphins aren't the most attractive job, I think the Ravens job because of their front office is very attractive and the success they've had. I think the Steelers job is very attractive because of that. But when you look at Atlanta, the Giants, the Arizona, the Clevelands, I'm telling you right now, I don't know if, and maybe I'm a homer and I'm blind to this because I'm a Dolphins fan, but living in Miami with no state tax, with that storied franchise's history, and having the opportunity to be the guy that can put it back together means a lot more to me, at least as a fan, than it did if I could coach the Arizona Cardinals or Atlanta Falcons. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I think the Dolphins have more of an attractive job than most people think. And it's going to be a very, very interesting week and a half here, probably because
Where
I
are you
think a
at with
lot
the
of shit's
Sullivan
going to have to
hire?
go down. No, I think the Sullivan hire was as close to an A as you can get. Um, they borrowed from the right organization. I love the Packers fundamentals, especially on the offensive line. They've always found guys like Elgton Jenkins out of A&M, right, and Zach Tom out of Wake Forest, who've become 2 guys that are the best of the position. I thought it was a great, great hire. And when we went through the candidates that we knew were interviewing, like, look, I'm not going to lie. Like Charles Alexander was interested in me because I thought the relationship with Harbaugh there would be able to lure him. I got to give the good Dolphins kudos for hiring who the best man for the job probably was, knowing that it might put them on the outside looking in at a certain coach candidate. I think it was important to get that GM right. And you had the guidance of Troy Aikman, but at the end of the day, I think the Dolphins got a guy that in 2 or 3 years is going to be, on the upper echelon GMs in football. And for us, I think that is paramount to turning the corner here. The Packers draft well in the middle rounds. Like they have a good philosophy, and I know Sully comes with outrageously impressive scouting background. Like I think a team like the Miami Dolphins, it's going to be fun, and you and I as draft heads are going to get to see a guy that's not in over his head, and he's not just drafting players. I think Chris Greer actually drafted decently. He just drafted players. I don't know if he had a plan that he actually stuck to in a formula. I think he just took players that were high on his board, but like there's an art to how you draft and when you take players, and I think we got the right GM. That's like for me, that's an A grade. Following up with the right coach would be very, very impressive for this offseason, and I give the Dolphins kudos and I give Stephen Ross kudos because I know this decision making process has not been easy for him. And he's putting his concern or his admiration for a coach to the side and saying I got to do what's best for this organization and the fan base, and I think this is a step in the right direction there.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things that are going to come down with Stephen Ross. Is number one, like I personally think he wants a veteran, experienced coach. I think
I
he's
agree.
tired of the first timers, but the problem with him has become, can he close? I mean, you look at like Huizenga, for example. Huizenga was a finisher. He closed on Jimmy Johnson. He closed on Nick Saban. He closed on Bill Parcells. Ross, he hasn't been able to finish the job with Jim Harbaugh. He wasn't able to finish the job with Sean Payton. He wasn't able to finish the job with Tom Brady. Okay? Now it's looking like he might not be able to finish the job with John. We'll see how it goes. And we'll talk about John a little bit, but still, it's not trending that way. Like, I think we have an owner that's not a closer as well, and that's another problem here too. So
Well, and it goes back a little further than that, right? Do you remember, like, this is, I think, pre-Twitter days, right? But, like, you remember when there was that big push when Peyton Manning was leaving the Colts and,
yeah,
the
Manning to
Dolphins.
Miami. The Facebook used to be. I used to have that as my Facebook banner. Manning to
Right,
Miami.
and it was a huge push, and obviously he met with Elway and fell in love with Denver, and I think we tried to get Marino to do the same, but, like,
Yeah,
obviously he went to the Broncos. Like, that is going to be part of Stephen Ross's legacy. Like, you can't tell me if they would have landed Sean Payton and Tom Brady that this team didn't make a run back with the talent they
yeah,
had when they were approaching that, right? I do think that Stephen Ross, I think his intentions have been really well, but this is just one thing where money isn't the only factor. And because of that, I think it's challenging for him sometimes to realize that, like, you got to offer more than just money. And that has been a common reoccurrence, has been his inability to land that big fish.
yeah. In every sense of the word. I mean, he hasn't been able to land that big fish. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Huizenga could finish. This guy couldn't. This guy can't. So, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. I'm not holding my breath. I've let it be known already. I let it be known yesterday that I think Kevin Stefanski is going to be the one who winds up being the coach of the Miami Dolphins. It's a move that it's kind of one of those I gotta wait and see moves. And it's because is he going to be much more than a lateral move than Mike McDaniel? Now, I've said this. People can say to me, "Hey, well, 2-time AP Coach of the Year with the Cleveland Browns. It's got to count for something." And you'd be right. That does count for something. But I got to see, because he's another guy who the quarterback situation is ultimately what got him fired. Now, I know Watson was more on the owner. I know the whole mess of Gabriel and Shador wasn't necessarily on him, but still, I mean, it's people use the excuse when I say I'm not high on Tomlin because he hasn't been able to get the quarterback right. Well, it's the GM's job to draft the quarterback. Well, I mean, don't act like Mike Tomlin wasn't a part of it. I mean, we all remember how badly he was courting Malik Willis. We all know he signed off on Kenny Pickett getting drafted as high as he did. And where is Kenny Pickett now? So I think the quarterback situation really matters with what we're going to do here. And let me get your thoughts on this, Neil. Everyone's holding the quarterback situation against us, and I get that. We don't have the quarterback. But, okay, you look at the Titans. All right, they got the quarterback, but they have nothing else. You look at they got $100 million cap and Mike Borzingi, but you know what I mean. They got nothing else on that roster. You look at the Giants. Yeah, they got my boy Jackson Dart, but Cam Scatterbo just broke his leg in half. Malik Neighbors is coming off a torn ACL, and the roster really ain't that great. Beyond that, whereas in Miami, it's a blank canvas. I mean, you get to pick your guy, and the evaluator you'd be collaborating with, and Jon-Eric Sullivan, he's the one that found Jordan Love for the Packers. So I don't really even think the quarterback situation is as bad. It's not like we're sitting here forcing Tua Tagovailoa on Harbaugh if he were to come here, Neil.
No, and I get what you're saying. I think from the outside perspective, though, the thing that's tough is that you're going to have to move on from Tua, eat a $99 million cap space, and you're not in the draft position this year. Yeah. Yeah. I just don't know if you're in the position to go and land that quarterback this year. Like, I thought Bo Nix, when Peyton did do it, was a massive reach, and he's turned out to be probably better. I still have my doubts about him in big games, and we'll get to see that this weekend. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things that probably is up against us. But I agree with what when you're saying, like let's not look at these other jobs and act like they're home runs. Like, the Giants, to me, like, I think Jackson Dart has shown a lot of promise. There's no doubt. But, like, I feel like a lot of these young quarterbacks get anointed too early. Like, he played and lost a lot of football games this year, right? And I know he didn't have the weapons on the outside, and
he made Wan'Dale Robinson a 1,000+ yard receiver. In his fairness, and what the hell was Wan'Dale Robinson before Jackson Dart arrived?
But and then Cam Ward on Tennessee, like as good as he showed glimpses of being, like the Titans are one of the worst teams in football again,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a directionless franchise. And
Yeah.
Arizona, Arizona's Arizona. They're awful, right? And the Browns, like they drafted two quarterbacks. They have Watson, but they still don't have a quarterback, right? And
Yeah.
four of their five starters on their offensive line are
And
free
aren't they still
agents.
on the hook for Watson?
Oh yeah, they got one more year of it, and four
Yeah. So
starting
they're
offensive
in the
linemen are
same.
free agent.
They're in a worse position than we are in the quarter, and you got to be in Cleveland. On top of it,
Right.
you got to live in Cleveland. Let's
Right.
and like I said to you, Atlanta, Neil. I mean, they got Bijan. Okay, we got Achane. They got Drake London. Okay, we got Jalen Waddle. Kyle Pitts is a free agent. Okay, Darren Waller's a free agent. I think we got pieces on the offensive line. I think we got pieces on the defense. I mean, they're in a worse situation too. They're stuck with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, and Michael Penix looks like he ain't gonna be anything special. And Kirk Cousins, you're on the hook for a little bit right now.
I think
So
he's
it's
going to be
not
their
even that
starter
much
next
better.
year, right? Cousins will probably be their starter next year with
it's
Matt
not
Ryan
even- is
taking
it
the
really-
helm.
Like you could wouldn't Harbaugh be more excited if Jon-Eric Sullivan could find a way to make Malik Willis fit than having a guy like Kirk Cousins? I don't know. I just don't think it's that bad of a situation as people paint it, Neil. Maybe I'm too optimistic. I just honestly don't. It's not like we're stuck with anything right now because they've said they're willing to move off of they're willing to move off of Tua. And I mean, let me throw this at you, Neil. Does all of a sudden a guy like Ty Simpson become interesting at 11?
I hope not. I'll be honest, I hope not. But maybe. I think the Dolphins have the third best vacant job right now. I do. I think the Ravens and Steelers are above them. But I think other than that, I think the Dolphins do. And I think a big thing that coaches are going to look for is that Stephen Ross will allow you to put together the best coaching staff around you that money can buy. And not all owners will do that. Like he'll give you $6 million to go bring in a Todd Monken, right? Like he'll give you $6 million to go get Wink Martindale or Jim Schwartz, or you know what I mean? Like he'll give you that. So like I think that is a big feather of the cap. I don't think it's a big thing. I think you just got to temper that next year is going to be a challenging year, but then you're going to be well positioned in once we get rid of Tyreek's money and Tua's money, they're actually going to be in really good salary cap space in the future. And they have actually a pretty good cupboard of draft picks this year. You're going to be able to go get your quarterback, and you do have two bona fide weapons on the offensive side of the ball, right? Achane and Waddle. That has to be attractive. I think between Aaron Brewer and Patrick Paul, you have two solidified pieces of the offensive line that are young players that are. Aaron Brewer is in the top three at his position. Patrick Paul's an ascending left tackle. So that's definitely got to be valuable to some teams. And, look, you got a lot of work to do on the defense side of the ball, but not on the defensive line. You got a lot of young players. You got an all-pro linebacker in Jordan Brooks. I mean, there is a lot. You got a good veteran, heady, savvy player with Minka Fitzpatrick that's a good locker room guy. Like, I think there's a lot of good building blocks. And, they're going to make some decisions. They're going to release some players. Bradley Chubbs, I think Jason Sanders, Alec Ingold's of the world to create cap. But I think the Dolphins are a team in transition, but with a owner who is as flexible financially as Stephen Ross is, you could turn the corner very quick. I think next year is probably something like this year, but I think following year, like the Dolphins could get right back in the playoff mix. I don't think in today's NFL it's 3 years and you're uncompetitive and you just got to keep I think in the NFL and the Broncos are case and proof that you could turn it around pretty quick. And if the Dolphins find the quarterback, look, that accelerates everything.
Mm-hmm. And who knows, man? Maybe outside of day one, you can get a Garrett Nussmeier, a Chambliss, a Taylor Green, a Sawyer Robinson, and flip him into some Jalen Daniels and flip him into something. Who knows, right?
Yeah, because I'm not in the game of paying Malik Willis $20 million a year.
No, you know what? Use one of those third round picks. You got all these third round
right.
picks. Just use one of them.
Right, because if you pay a contract, you're kind of stuck in it, right? Because Malik Willis is going to get Willis. He's going to get multiple year options out there.
Yeah.
And look, I look. He played impressive football down the stretch. There's no doubt about it. But there's a reason that he didn't get that opportunity till then. After failing in other opportunities, it reminds me a lot of Matt Flynn a few years when he threw 7 touchdowns against the Lions, and then Seattle paid him, and then they end up starting Russell. But I think honestly, I'm more than okay giving Quinn Ewers a fair shot with a guy that you invest a third round pick in on his heels and go young. And if you don't hit lightning in a bottle with either of those, put in the full court press on the 2027 draft to go get what we're going to talk about it ad nauseum, but it's a loaded quarterback class. Far better than this. This draft overall is not great, right? And the quarterback
Yeah.
position's really bad. Like
Yeah.
next year is like an A+ quarterback group. Like,
Yeah. We were talking about it before we went live, people. Like, think about this. In the first round alone, Julian Sand, Arch Manning, Dante Moore, if he goes back, Lenore Sellers, Sam Levitt, who's going to LSU, Brandon Sorsby, CJ Bailey from NC State. There's potentially like 7 guys that could go in
Darian
the first
Mensah,
round.
right?
Darian Mensah can sneak up. What does Josh Hoover do in Indiana? Do Nico Iamaleava or do DJ Lagway take a leap this year? You know what I mean? Like, it's a stacked class in 2027. You don't have to reach in 2026 just because you think you need it, right? So
Yeah, John Mateer, another one, right? If he doesn't, because we got to find out in the next 24 hours what he does, right?
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into all the head coaching updates for people, Neil. So let's start off and let's show everyone here. The Dolphins have requested to speak with Lions DC Kelvin Shepard for their vacant head coach job, a source said. This came out last evening, so he gets his first head coaching interview. Then this morning, Albert Breer went ahead and he let everyone know that Jesse Minter has interview requests from the Browns, the Cardinals, the Dolphins, the Falcons, the Giants, the Raiders, the Ravens, and the Titans. All 8 teams with openings have put in a request for Jesse Minter. And also, people, Dolphin fans, they will remember this name, Neil. The Dolphins have requested an interview with Raiders DC Patrick Graham for their head coaching job. So a few things to talk about here, Neil. First of all, Brian makes a good point. He says, why are we not talking about Matt Burke, everyone remembers him with the Dolphins too, and his defense was fantastic on the weekend. And George says, you have an update on the LaFleur situation. No, that LaFleur situation, we are going to know by the end of the week, and I think that's why this is slow rolling a little bit too. You're going to either talks are going to break down or an extension is going to be signed. This isn't going to be a thing that takes a couple months. I'm telling you right now, that's the sense that everyone gets, right? So Kelvin Shepard and Patrick Graham, Neil, the Rooney Rule has been officially checked for the Miami Dolphins.
Right.
They are now added to the list of all the candidates. So what are your thoughts on Kelvin Shepard, Patrick Graham, and Jesse Minter? Because to be honest with you, Jesse Minter is the only one that maybe gets me a little bit excited between the 3 of them.
Yeah.
But now it's Clint Kubiak, John Harbaugh, Kevin Stefanski, Jeff Hafley, Chris Shula, Robert Saleh, Kelvin Shepard, Jesse Minter, and Patrick Graham are the known candidates. So what are your thoughts on Graham, Shepard, and Minter?
Yeah, well, like Minter for me, him and Clint Kubiak are my favorite guys that would be first-time coaches.
Yeah,
and I don't know
Shula to that list.
I don't know if it was foreshadowing or if I just had one too many whiskeys, but on September 18th, I said at this time next year, I have a feeling Jesse Minter is going to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So I don't know. He's got a lot of interest. I still think that's the way the Ravens are going to go, to be honest. But I think there's a lot to like about Jesse Minter. Like when you break down the hierarchy of coaches, like obviously like you and I both want John Harbaugh. Like we're not running away from that. If Matt LaFleur became available, he'd be right under Harbaugh for me. Like, agreed. And actually,
same.
You could even put him on that tier for me because I think he's a great young coach. And then I automatically love the synergy he would have with our general manager. I think that is. There's a reason why people like to work with people they're familiar with. It's that synergy. They already understand how to work together. So like LaFleur would be an absolute home run. Look, Patrick Graham did a good job in his tenure in Miami, and I think he's a really good positional coach. But as a head coach, I'm out. I'm out. Like that'd be a move that we'd be on this podcast throwing stuff and flipping out. Like if you got rid of Mike McDaniel for Patrick Graham or Kelvin Shepard, we're all going to be pissed off, right? Like, and Kelvin Shepard, I mean, that Lions defense Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think he just got that job from Aaron Glenn. I think he needs a lot more seasoning. I know that he has some really good leadership qualities that a lot of people like, but like, nah, not as my head coach of my football team that hasn't won a playoff game in 25 years. Like,
I
I
agree.
need something. I need something that's solidified. Like for me, give me the Harbaughs. Give me the LaFleur. I'd like to see Mike McCarthy at least be interviewed for the position. But like some of these names, I think that they're doing their due diligence. They're giving a lot of people an attaboy, a pat on the back. You know what I mean? And that's what good organizations do. Out of that group, the only guy that would even strike my interest is Jesse Minter, and he's another guy that's going to have a lot of competition on that Jim Harbaugh tree, the Michigan tree, the Ravens tree. Minter's a really impressive guy, and I'll say this: I think his defense did a really good job the other night. And I think he's pretty undermanned with the Chargers. So
Yeah, he
I
is.
I feel like he's a guy that could get me excited. And I actually think for a first time head coach, he'd actually be able to develop a pretty damn good staff around him as well.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, man, I'm kind of with Ross on this one. If our hunch is correct, I want a proven guy. I'm ready. Enough of this first time stuff. It just hasn't worked, right? I'm ready for a proven guy. But if we end up not able to get a proven guy, I like Jesse Minter. I like Shula. I like Kubiak a lot. You know, I, I I could get around on Halfley because I've heard great things, but I had him more higher on my head coaching list because I just felt like it'd almost be a foregone conclusion. He's going to be one of their top candidates. But honestly, I'd be interested in Campanelli too. I'd be interested to hear what Mike LaFleur, the OC of the Rams, has to say, because I mean, look at how good of a year Stafford had under him, right? So,
Yeah.
are you shocked that Anthony Weaver hasn't got an interview yet, or do you think this is just a total house clean?
I am, because I thought they would do it. I mean, he was in Baltimore today,
Yeah,
Anthony
yeah,
Weaver.
yeah. I know that.
So yeah, so I don't look. I don't think Anthony Weaver. I thought early in the stages that he had a shot of getting a head coaching job, but then obviously some bigger names have shaken free or potentially shaken free. I think he's going to be on the outside looking in again.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see what whoever the Dolphins do hire, if Anthony Weaver has a shot here. More than likely, I think he's probably going to see an exit. And, like, depending on where John Harbaugh lands, that could be a spot for him.
yeah,
If Jesse Minter does leave the Chargers, I could see Jim Harbaugh having interest in Anthony Weaver. I
yeah,
think he'll definitely get another DC job. But I don't know. Maybe the Dolphins just are trying to clean the slate. I mean, they've made some additional exits to our assistant GMs today. Maybe
yeah,
they're just trying to rewrite the entire ship and get a whole new cast of characters. And
yeah,
I'll be honest, I don't hate that.
yeah.
I like Anthony
And,
Weaver, and I think Anthony Weaver did a good job. But like, I believe sometimes you guys just rip the Band-Aid off, and there's
yeah.
collateral damage. And it's nothing against Anthony Weaver, but I don't want any coach that comes in here to have anything that's tainted from previous regimes. Let's start fresh.
And then just for me here, um, with Robert Saleh,
Old Bobby.
the problem with Saleh is the same problem I have with Flores. Can he put together a good staff? And brother, you signed off on Zach Wilson.
Right.
Like I question your ability to evaluate and get that position right. So, keeping with the head coaching cycle and carousel here regarding the Miami Dolphins, the guy who I think is ultimately going to be the head coach, he had the first in-person interview with the Miami Dolphins today. And that, of course, is Kevin Stefanski, former Browns coach. Kevin Stefanski is interviewing in person for the Dolphins head coaching job today. Stefanski, a two-time coach of the year, previously interviewed with the Titans, Giants, Falcons, and the Ravens. Ultimately, this is where I think it all lands, and I've said this. It goes back to Albert Breer's original report that started this whole fire when he said if Harbaugh and Stefanski became available, it could be a factor. Me and you have talked about this, Neal, privately. We're both in agreement that it kind of feels like the Dolphins, maybe why they're not as full court pressing Harbaugh. Like, I mean, look at like Mara going out to lunch with Harbaugh, not as full court pressing as the Giants are right now. And maybe that reason is because they would be delighted if they landed a Stefanski, Neal, or they're waiting to see, I know Tomlin's going to step away, but they're going to make the call, right? They're going to see what they're going to gauge interest. And the problem is you'd have to, trade for
picks.
Mike Tomlin.
You got to
right?
trade compensation for sure. Yeah.
Which that's a problem. But, do you think maybe a guy like Stefanski being available is why and I think they're waiting on LaFleur a little bit, but do you think that's maybe why they're not full court pressing Harbaugh the way the Giants are?
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. I actually like how they're operating. I don't want to be that desperate person. You know what I mean? I don't want us to look desperate. I don't think you have to be desperate because there's good candidates. I think you have to do your due diligence and you got to shoot your shot. And I saw the Josina Anderson report that the Dolphins, were quietly waiting for the Ravens and Steelers to let go of Tomlin and Harbaugh. But I think the reason they went go of Mike is that maybe they thought they had to take a shot with one of those big names, but if they didn't, they could land on a guy like Kevin Stefanski. And when we had this podcast a month ago and we were talking about potential of him getting released from Cleveland, I think we both said that like he'd be high on our list. And look, the Browns are as organizational of a dumpster fire as there is in sports. They have a very okay and average GM. He was a 2-time coach of the year. Like, yeah, the quarterback situations was kind of alarming, right? But I see it when you get a guy like Deshaun Watson forced down your throat because you don't have harmony between what you want and what your front office wants. You get bad results. I think, when you look at the landscape of the coaches that are available, and I agree with you, by the way, I actually think that if you ask me today, Neal, you have to go put $1,000 on somebody's name to be the Dolphins coach, I'd put it on Kevin Stefanski. And, I'll tell you, man, like I think that he offers a lot on the offense side of the ball. I think he's a better overall head coach than Mike, but it all is going to boil down to what do we do at quarterback to support him, right? And if you look at it like Harbaugh, there's McCarthy, Stefanski, like they're some of the best names available. I will say this: it's a dangerous game, right? Because we know the Giants are in on Harbaugh and Stefanski. We are trying to be in on all of them. Be careful. You got to know when to fold them, right? Because you don't want to be in a situation that a Harbaugh might choose a Tennessee, Stefanski goes to the Giants, and then you're like, oh shit, like what I mean? What's my move?
But no, it's setting up more like the Giants are going to be like if Harbaugh doesn't pick them. The way this is lining up, like I don't think it's a coincidence that we hear Albert Breer says, Stefanski and Harbaugh would factor in us moving off McDaniel. We fire McDaniel 24 hours later. And our first in-person interview is Stefanski. I do not think that's a coincidence. I think they're setting themselves up where if Harbaugh chooses the Giants or pivots to the Titans, we're going to move on Stefanski. And I think it's going to be the Giants that are going to get stuck.
You're spot on. You're spot on. I think this Harbaugh decision is going to come sooner than people think. I think it's going to happen by the end of this week. And I think that the Dolphins are getting their ducks in a row that if it's not them, they get their guy they want. And I think they're probably I think Kevin Stefanski's got the most realistic shot to be the next Miami Dolphins coach. I'm with you lockstep. 100%. I agree with you.
I think Harbaugh decides the beginning of next week. And the reason why is I think, Neal, he's also waiting to see what happens with LaFleur. Because I think Green Bay all of a sudden shoots to the top of that desirable list because unlike the Ravens, they're a storied franchise like the Ravens and the Steelers, but unlike the Steelers or whatever the case may be, it's because that's really the only other storied franchise open. The Ravens aren't open for Harbaugh. The Steelers don't have the quarterback. Where all of a sudden you got Jordan Love.
I don't think the Steelers are going to go to those blurred lines after Harbaugh. I think you're 100% right too on the Packers front. Like that's a job that's going to have a lot of interest. That opens up, and that might be. I know that Lamar is probably the better football player than Jordan Love right now, but I warn people this. I live here.
Dude, 323 and 4 touchdowns against Chicago was pretty impressive for Jordan Love. He wasn't the reason they lost.
For the Ravens, in the first time of their team history, they chose player over organization. And They let Ray Lewis go to Dallas and get a contract offer from the Cowboys when he was a free agent, and then they matched it and they came back. But they weren't willing to sacrifice the logo on the helmet for the name on the back of the jersey. They just let the best coach in their franchise's history go because now it's Lamar's team. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of bad things
Who's
that come with that on the
who's
back end.
who's a diva creeping up on 30, and injuries are starting to take a toll, and he hasn't developed into the pocket passer necessary for the playoffs quite yet. So we'll
Or we could
see.
just be blunt and say he's peaked. Right? Like he's peaked.
Uh,
Like you're not gonna see
yeah.
I still think Lamar is a fabulous football player.
Oh, he's
Don't get
great, especially in the regular
don't,
season.
don't get me wrong. I think what happens is though, when teams have a cadence on him and they've seen him multiple times, they adjust to him. And if you play Lamar a certain way, he has never been able to elevate. Now, like that game they lost against the
Does it
Steelers,
not go back to the Belichick and Flores when they shut him down in the playoffs? Remember
right?
they shut him down in the playoffs in that one year where he's wilding out his first full year as a starter. Remember they shut him down, and then they put the blueprint out there, and he hasn't been able to solve it.
But like that Ravens franchise, like, look, Bisciotti's a good owner. DaCosta is a good GM. I think he's overrated. He's definitely not even in the ballpark or wavelength of what Ozzie Newsome did in Baltimore. But I'll tell you, I'm very intrigued to see what they do next because who they hire, man, like I really don't know. Like I don't know. Like they came in a presser today and said Lamar will have input, but he won't have any decision making power. But like I don't know. That's a dangerous game to play when you give a quarterback that held you hostage in the national media for a contract the first time. He doesn't have an agent and he's got a contract due again. I think things are going to get pretty ugly here in Baltimore on the Ravens front pretty quickly. So, look, man, like I think for us, we all agree. Like Harbaugh's the golden goose, the guy that we want the most. Matt LaFleur to me would be an elite constellation prize, but if you get through those two things, I do think Kevin Stefanski is the next best man. It's like, I said that the GM was probably an A grade. I'd give Stefanski a B plus higher. And, if you came in with, Sully and Kevin Stefanski, to me, it looks a lot better than Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, if I'm just being
Yeah,
blunt. So
yeah,
I do hope that that's the route they go if they can't seal the deal with one of the bigger fish.
yeah. All right, let's keep it rolling here, and let's show the people the tweet you referenced from Josina Anderson. So Josina Anderson tweeted this out. She says, as a league source indicated to me over a week ago, and I'll tweet this now, don't let anyone tell you different. John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin are at the top of the Miami Dolphins wish list at head coach. A league source said it again just now. We'll see if the Dolphins can pull either off. It takes two to tango. There's a reason the Dolphins felt comfortable moving on from Mike McDaniel, the source added. As it relates to Mike Tomlin, his sentiments have been known since I tweeted back in November and before. Don't be surprised to see either of these coaches now upwards of $20 million per year. We'll see if Tomlin coaches next season. And then Armando Salguero, he came out and he said, Mike Tomlin is not expected to go to the Miami Dolphins per source, whether or otherwise. Told he's stepping away to be with his family and will make other decisions after. And then Ari Mirov said, Mike Tomlin leaving the organization means the Steelers will retain his rights. He was not fired. It seems likely he'll take a year off, possibly do TV, and then become a trade candidate next year, similar to Sean Payton when the Saints held his rights and later traded him to Denver. So that is the latest on the Mike Tomlin. You got conflicting reports that, we'll be interested in him. And Neal, on this show, Mike Tomlin getting fired and the Dolphins being interested in him is something we've been talking about since the offseason.
Yeah, man. And look, I think there could be truth in both sides of the story, right? But you and I were texting early on this Harbaugh thing, and we were talking directly about Josina Anderson and her implications of hitting teams and what they were trying to do. And I even commented on her thing. It's awfully quiet in Miami because she said the quiet team's trying to make the loudest splash, right?
Yeah.
Like I truly believe that things have been eerily quiet out of Miami on the Harbaugh situation. And I have my theories on it. I think they're going to try to do everything they can do to go land them. I don't think they're in the lead. I don't think they're in second, but I think they're going to try to do everything they can to do it. But I think Armando's right. I think Mike Tomlin is going to go into a year of TV. With that said, I think that if he was available to be a coach and he did get to choose and the Steelers didn't have his rights, as I said back in August, Miami would be at the top of that list. And I don't know if you saw what Josina's talked about warm weather. Those are the things that I had heard as well. And, back when I said this in August, like I got DMs from people that I've never met in my life told me I was an idiot, that Steelers would never, and Tomlin would never, part. And my story has always been consistent. I said it wouldn't be a firing. It'd be him walking away. It'd be a mutual breakup. And I think that's where we're heading, right? Like, I think Tomlin got burnt out. The organization has been status quo for a very long time. They have not been able to deliver a quarterback that could be competitive. Like you watch the Steelers, their offense is embarrassing, right? It's
Arthur Smith is terrible. He should be embarrassed.
It's like, let me just find a way to get the ball to Kenneth Gainwell by the line of scrimmage and see if we can do anything.
Yeah, or Calvin Austin. Yeah.
Right. And DK Metcalf, I mean, in big games, what a fraud that guy.
How did he drop that ball, man?
Right. I mean, and Houston on the defense side of it was a master class. But, look, I don't think Tomlin's going to coach this year, but I think if he did.
Neil, Stroud was giving them that game. How do you not capitalize, dude? Like, how do you have 3 turnovers and you only get 6 points, Neil? That's hilarious. Anyways, sorry. That's
no. I was just going to say, but I think Josina's right. And I think, that he's not going to coach in Miami. I don't think he's going to coach at all. I think he's going to do a year of TV and recharge. And, he'll probably take the Sean Payton route. So, but I do think that Miami's obviously interested in getting a seasoned coach. And they like to make the big splash. Can they do it?
Let me ask you this. We all know the saying, right? Money talks, bullshit walks.
Right.
Stephen Ross says, we'll trade one of our 3rd-round picks because we got like 3 of them, right?
Right.
We'll trade one of our 3rd-round picks. We're not giving you a first. Are you crazy? We'll trade you one of our 3rd-round picks, and he offers Tomlin $20 million a year. Do you think Tomlin's going to say no?
No, and I even kind of half joked that I would take pick 11 and flip it to Pittsburgh for pick 21 and Tomlin.
I wouldn't. That's too rich. But I'll give you. Listen, here's where I'm at. I don't even want to trade capital for him. I'm still like Tomlin. I'm so on the fence with Tomlin. It's like, there's guys I'm on the fence with that I'll be okay with and I'd get, but I need to see more. And Tomlin be that, yeah, like I can look past the 19th, the 19 straight winning seasons because who put Arthur Smith in place? Like he inherited Cowher's team and won with that. Right? Like, we go back to he signed off on Kenny Pickett. He hasn't got the quarterback, they signed off on Mason Rudolph. He hasn't got the quarterback situation right. I've got legitimate questions, surrounding Mike Tomlin. Once this franchise really got out of the Cowher era and it really became a full reflection of Mike Tomlin in terms of staff building and roster building. I don't know, man. Okay, you can sit here and say, well, Harbaugh, but okay, first of all, Harbaugh's won playoff games, but also 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. 2 guys he was there from the ground up when they got drafted, and neither one was a top 10 guy. So in terms of where they were drafted, so right, 32 and 18, I believe, for Flacco and Lamar. So I don't know, man. I would have to be. I'm not sold on Mike Tomlin, and what's crazy? When I broke into this community in 2019 and we were doing the Tuesday night panel, I remember saying these exact same things that I wasn't totally sold on him yet. And now that we've had a good Porsche sample size without Ben Roethlisberger, man, I don't know, Neil. Like Jon-Eric Sullivan, he could hire the right guy, but then, he could draft the right guy, Neil. But do we trust Mike Tomlin to put the right offensive minds around him? Because again, I go back to what I just saw from Arthur Smith. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem.
I'm a big Tomlin fan, and look, I agree. Like more than most head coaches, he does have input in the draft. Like I know that for sure. Like he definitely is involved in the decision making process. I don't think he makes the decision, but I think he's involved, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the main reasons that he's leaving though is the organization's inability to surround him with that quarterback. I think Harbaugh and Tomlin both have a similar story where, like, I know they both won a Super Bowl, right? Like,
Yeah.
and they both did it with the leftovers from their more successful regimes, right? Like Harbaugh inherited 4 Hall of Famers on defense with Suggs, Nada, Ray Lewis, and Ed Reed. And, that Ravens offensive line with that year was loaded. And they had, Bolden and Torrey Smith, Jacoby Jones, Todd Heat, Dennis Pitt. Like they were always like the Ravens were so loaded, and Harbaugh definitely benefited from having. He has to be the best GM in NFL history in Ozzie Newsome, right? And then you get Lamar, who's this enigma that takes the league by storm, and for whatever reason, Harbaugh just couldn't get that team over the hump. I think the Steelers, like, obviously Tomlin won with Ben, and Ben was a carryover from the previous regime, and they didn't even come close to finding a player that could play quarterback. They were so desperate that they went Aaron Rodgers. I actually will say I thought it was impressive that they won the AFC North with Aaron Rodgers and that receiving core, especially considering that Metcalf was down at those last 2 games. But he always had that defense, the defensive side of the ball. But both of them probably, even though they're successful Hall of Fame coaches, have every stat you want. I think both of them would say that they underachieved with what the rosters they had. Like both of them only being a one-time coach in 18 to 19 years, one-time Super Bowl champ. It's kind of crazy that they've only each won one. You know what I mean? So I like what Tomlin brings from the culture, because I think he's the ultimate player coach, and I think he does a better job than any coach in football that has walks that fine line of being your friend, but the same guy that will go there and cut your fucking head off if you do anything that damages their organization. But look, I think he wants warm weather. I bet you he's the next coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2027, right? Like I just don't think because here's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, because we're gonna hire someone and we're gonna be out of the cycle now.
Right. So we're out of it. So we're not. So like that's what I'm saying. Like, and look, trading draft compensation when you're a team that needs to win and develop via the draft, you can't do both things. So like, as much as I like Mike Tomlin, like, unless it's just a swap of a draft pick, I wouldn't be interested in trade. Like if you had to give up what Sean Payton got, no way.
Neil, the perfect domino to fall would be Matt LaFleur.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
You know what? Because I'd trade a third. You could convince me to trade a 3rd-round pick for Matt LaFleur.
Well, you'd be the front runners for him, right?
Yeah. And listen, people can say what they want about Matt LaFleur. Listen, a couple of those love touchdowns, Neil, I don't know if you remember them, but that Watson touchdown and that Dobbs touchdown where, look at the Watson touchdown. He schemed off the play action and got the whole defense biting to one side and then rolled Watson out wide open for the touchdown. And then the Dobbs touchdown out of that bunch set to the left. Brother, he was scheming up easy touchdowns in the red zone in the playoffs for his quarterback. I'm sitting here saying, man, if Mike could do that, he'd probably still have his job right now. You know what I mean? Like, I like, so anyways.
Well, like LaFleur is, so you get, I think, an equivalent to Mike McDaniel as an offensive coach, but you get a drastic improvement as an NFL head coach. You get a way better head coach. Yeah,
you get a better play caller, and you get a better developer, I think, too. I mean, you look at what he's done with Jordan Love, and man, that would have me excited for Jon-Eric Sullivan and Matt LaFleur working together, right?
Right.
So let's keep it rolling here. Let's give everyone an update on Harbaugh, Neil. So the latest on Harbaugh is this. Diana Rossini tweeted out, as Harbaugh continues to gather information about his next landing spot, she's told the Giants, Falcons, and Titans are considered the favorites to land the former Ravens head coach at this time. Now, also for The Athletic, Ian Connor, who he's been providing great info this whole time regarding the situation. He was the first one to break the Mara lunch too, but he's also, I've played some clips of him up here. He's provided a lot. He's discussed the power structure and all that. He said, on demand, mid-second round update of John Harbaugh Invitational that might need updating shortly. So to your point, Neil, about the decision coming pretty quickly. He said the Giants are -6. The Falcons are -5. The Titans are 4 strokes under. The Dolphins are 3 strokes under. And the Browns are 1 stroke under. So this is what his notes are. Matt Ryan is dangerous with a wedge in hand. Watch out. Miami arguing with rules official over having no quarterback in the bag. And sentimental hometown favorite Cleveland needs to rally to make the cut. So he has us as the 4th favorite right now based on what he's hearing regarding John Harbaugh, which kind of lines up with what Diana Rossini was saying, right? So I don't know, man. It looks like I think we're right where we said when before me and Neal went live. I told Neal that the sense I was getting is that we have become a quiet sleeper. And then Neal mentioned to all of you, it's all quiet on the Western Front, basically, with the Dolphins. And, I think that's where we're at right now, is where we've gone from top to contender to now we're kind of being forgotten about, but we're still in the running.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if we didn't get an opportunity to meet with John Harbaugh. I really would. And, we all know there's levels of different relationships. We all know the Michigan connections between Ross and Jim Harbaugh, but there's a relationship between Ross and John Harbaugh, right? And that is something you can't ignore. I'd be shocked. Look, I get where if you have a young quarterback under team control on a rookie deal with a lot of cap space, how a lot of these jobs can be very attractive, right? With that said, I think if the Dolphins have the opportunity to take their shot, that they're going to make their best case to do so. And it's one of the few situations in modern kind of storytelling in the NFL where you don't see all the national people lockstep. You've seen a lot of different, viewpoints on who's in the lead, who's where on a lot of this, right? Cool. The Giants met with them and they're aggressive and, they're stalking them. At the end of the day, their GM has proven to be one of the worst GMs in football. And that's just case in point.
And their owner ain't that much better either.
Right. And, as good as their defensive line is, they are drafting 5th for a reason again, right? They're a team that over the last 5 years has been one of the worst teams in football.
That's what I'm telling you, Neal. If Harbaugh or LaFleur, whoever comes here, brother, if you get the quarterback right, whether it's a bridge guy who you can win with or whether it's a kid you draft and you get it right, we could be a playoff team in year 1. There's enough pieces here when you look at the weapons, when you look at the offensive line, the defense. There's enough pieces to build off here where if you get the quarterback right and build properly through free agency and the draft this offseason, this automatically could become a playoff team.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is I'm not sitting here saying the Dolphins are better than all these situations, but I can't accept that they're worse. For every Cam Ward, you wouldn't take Devon Achane over Tony Pollard. You wouldn't take Jalen Waddle over Chamari DK or whatever his name is. You wouldn't outside of Jeffrey Simmons. I don't know if there's a guy on the Titans that won all my defense. And you know what I mean? And you look at Cleveland. You got Shedeur Sanders, that mess, right? You got 4 of your starting offensive linemen that are free agents. All of them are aging.
No weapons other than Quinshon Judkins, who's coming off a major injury.
I mean, Harold Fannin, I think, was a good young tight end.
Yeah, and the Joker here and there.
But and Joku's an unrestricted free agent. He's gone, right? Your best receiver on the outside is Jerry Jeudy. Whatever. Myles Garrett's a one of one, but the Browns have a good, tough defense.
Their defense is better than our defense. That's where.
No doubt about it. Arizona. I mean, man, I don't know if there's anything outside of Trey McBride at Arizona that I'd even want on my team. Will Johnson, maybe, but you know what I mean? Arizona's Arizona. The Falcons. I love Bijan. I think Bijan is the best running back in football. With that said, Tua Tagovailoa skull dragged them, right? Didn't we just beat the shit out of the Falcons this year? You know what I mean? You got Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. You got those 2 albatrosses where you don't even know who the hell your quarterback.
They got Drake London, but we got Jalen Waddle, and I think we got more defensive pieces. And like I said with the Giants, you got Dart, but Scadabo's coming off a major injury, and Neighbors is coming off a major injury. And then what else really do they have? Abdul Carter, and that's where it ends.
Yeah, and look, our
they
opinion.
Got a few offensive line pieces. I'll give them that.
We'll take our opinions out of it. Look at the draft order. We draft 11. They're all drafted in front of us. That tells us we were better than them, right? If Tua was awful this year, as good as Dart looked at times this year and Ward, none of them played to the level that Tua played in prime Tua season. It's a fast league. A lot can go wrong. I just think I think the Dolphins are on the outside looking in with Harbaugh. But I will say
It's very eerily quiet, and I think Josina Anderson's a very good reporter. And the timing of when they released and fired Mike McDaniel versus the timing when Harbaugh shook free from Baltimore, I don't think it takes a rocket science to see that those moves had something to do with each other.
Yeah.
And whether it's just that Ross learned from his past mistakes, wanted to court Harbaugh and didn't want to do it at the expense of a coach that he liked. Maybe he said, you know what, I like Mike McDaniel so much, I'm not going to embarrass him in the public eye. I'm actually going to give him the freedom to go out and find his next job, right? Which is admirable, and it shows that you've learned from your past mistakes. For me, Albert Breer, Josina Anderson are making it seem like the Dolphins are more involved than everybody else. And I just feel like maybe they have a rabbit in a hat somewhere, and they have some type of intel that is letting them know they're improving the coaching situation. Because I don't think they were firing Mike McDaniel for Clint Kubiak. I don't think they were firing Mike McDaniel for Jesse Minter. I sure as hell don't think they were firing him for Patrick Graham.
Shepard.
Right?
Yeah, it's we got over this. It's Stefanski, Harbaugh. They think they have a shot at LaFleur. They think they have a shot at one of these legitimate veterans.
I think it's if it's one of those three guys, their plan worked. I will say, if it's like a guy like Jeff Hafley or something like that, I think we're kind of making the mistakes we've had in the past. And I'm not saying he's a bad coach, and I self-admit that he's probably the coach I know least about in this whole cycle. With that said, I don't think they let go of Mike McDaniel to get Jeff Hafley. I think that they have a feeling, or they have intel. And look, they hired Troy Aikman to get that intel. And if Aikman's getting them the right intel, they must have some type of knowledge of something they think is going to happen. That's good. Because here's what we do know. If Josina Anderson's report's right? Harbaugh did get free. Tomlin did get free. Maybe they think LaFleur is going to get free. Closing, if you can't close, it sucks, right? But I actually think they've handled this whole GM and coaching search perfectly. Yeah. They just got to get lucky and land the man. And if they can't do it, there's good consolation prizes out there, and I think that's what we're looking at. But I don't want this to turn into, the Dolphins are a bad organization because Harbaugh chose the Giants, if that happens. Because that's not the case. They are making their pitch. Some coaches have allegiances and desires to be somewhere for multiple reasons. But if we end up and we're talking on Monday or next week and we have Kevin Stefanski as our head coach, I don't think anybody in this fan base should be like, oh shit, what a bad hire. We should have just kept Mike. There will be people that are like that, but I think it's an obvious upgrade.
And then finally here for all of you guys to see the Dolphins, they have continued to make changes. They have moved on from Marvin Allen. Allen had been with the organization since 2019. So Marvin Allen no longer with the Miami Dolphins. So there is another change at the executive level. Quickly, final thoughts, Neal.
Man, no, I look, next 72, 96 hours, it's going to be crazy. Things are going to happen. I don't know if we've seen the last coach vacancy, and that's obviously a nod at the Packers job. Sometimes no news is not good news, and they were working on a contract. It didn't happen imminently, so who knows? But I'm up for a crazy offseason, getting any crazier than it can get, and I think the Dolphins are in on the right candidates. Let's just see what they come up with, man. But new GM, I'm stoked for him, and let's see him, Troy Aikman, Stephen Ross, and what that contingency can do, and hopefully they can go land us a clear upgrade at the head coaching position.
Before we get out of here, I do want to shout out the sponsor of today's video, and that, of course, is Sleeper. Shout out to Sleeper. And listen, if you think that you know football, then go and try Sleeper out right now. Turn your football knowledge into real money with the Sleeper app, the ultimate fantasy sports app that turns game day into payday. Just download the Sleeper app, pick more or less on your favorite players. With more stats than any other daily fantasy app, just choose 2 or more of your favorite players from pregame or live. Pick more or less from the predicted stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money if your picks win. Use promo code FINSIDE, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Shout out to Sleeper for sponsoring the video. All right, we had almost 700 of you in the room today. Do me the favor, smash that like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. And then tomorrow we'll be back for another one. All right, we got busy times ahead of us. So the head coaching carousel continues to turn, and so do the days of our lives as Dolphin fans. Hey, if one thing, at least they're giving us an interesting offseason. We'll catch you on the next one. Smash that like button, subscribe if you are new, fins up, and appreciate all y'all. Have a blessed night.